Let's dive right in because what we're looking at in today's explainer is going to completely shatter how you view that furry friend sleeping at the foot of your bed right now. According to an absolutely impossible ancient text, our common household dogs are not just pets. They're actually an advanced biological alarm system. Let's break down exactly how this ancient system was built and, more importantly, what it was designed to detect.
So it begs the ultimate question: why were dogs really placed on Earth? Well, back in 1947, a clay fragment discovered right alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls provided a terrifying, non-metaphorical answer to that exact question. It wasn't some abstract myth or poem. It was, literally, a technical manual. Cataloged by researchers as Tablet SM7714, this document was inscribed with 12 highly specific codes in Old Sumerian cuneiform, which is one of humanity's absolute oldest writing systems. What's wild is that it deliberately paired specific human population numbers with bizarre animal behaviors. It was outlining a biological warning system meant to detect an impending cyclical return of something. Now, for decades, scholars just debated its legitimacy. But fast forward to 2003, and Dr. Sarah Villeneuve, a geneticist, realized that the human population numbers etched on this tablet actually matched known human genetic bottlenecks. Basically, periods in our history where the human population mysteriously shrank down to near extinction. And the math here was accurate to within just 2,000 individuals. That discovery sparked a massive investigation into the text.
Okay, so let's set the stage with part 1, the engineers and the plague.
The foundational ancient texts describe our predecessors, the Anunnaki. But here's the catch. They aren't described as magical, spiritual deities at all. The translation strictly paints them as a highly organized hierarchy of workers, engineers, and scientists. They arrived on Earth in vessels they called mu, which were ships that moved through the sky. And they didn't come here to be worshipped. They came here to solve a critical, life-threatening problem. That problem was known as the Namar. It's described as a deadly, invisible plague or pestilence that was native to Earth. Despite all their highly advanced technology, the Anunnaki were vulnerable to it, and they were dying. The threat lived beneath the surface of the planet, and this forced these engineers to come up with two desperate biological solutions.
So you have two different interventions happening. On one hand, a leader named Anu oversaw the creation of the Lulu. That's humanity engineered strictly as a labor force to harvest resources. But while humans were being put to work, another engineer, Enki, was running a side project. He created the Kel, which is what we now know as dogs. They definitely weren't made for manual labor. They were deployed as a guardian species, a living detection grid.
If we look at the linguistics, the ancient word Kel translates to the unseen observer, or the sentinel. The Sumerian texts actually mandated that this guardian species had to be deployed across every single human settlement. It wasn't a cultural preference for having pets, it was a mandatory biological safeguard. They were required everywhere to detect the invisible Namar threat before it could strike.
Which brings us to how this all works in part 2, the guardian system activated.
The first 3 codes on the tablet act like a maintenance manual across generations. They detail a creature with hyper-auditory hearing, ultraviolet vision, barometric pressure detection, and severe sensitivity to electromagnetic frequencies. What is absolutely mind-blowing here is that modern science completely confirms dogs possess every single one of these supernatural sensory abilities today. The Sumerians were somehow documenting advanced canine biology thousands of years ago.
Then we get to code 4, which demands a terrifyingly specific metric. Exactly 1 dog must be maintained for every 300 humans to keep the detection grid functional. When researchers took that number and ran it against modern nations today, from places like Germany all the way to Kenya, this 1 to 300 ratio mysteriously still holds up in our populations. But there is a very dark implication to this math. If this 1 to 300 ratio is strictly required for safety, what happens if the human population grows too large to maintain it? Well, the texts suggest human populations were deliberately capped. The records align moments where humanity exceeded this safety threshold with sudden population reduction events, things like wars, localized floods, and plagues, all deliberately designed to ensure the guardian system's ratio never failed. Now let's explore what happens when the system actually goes off in part 3, triggers and earthquakes.
Code 5 details the irrational trigger behaviors. We're talking extreme agitation, a sudden refusal to enter specific rooms, pointless howling, pacing, or staring blankly into empty space. I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen your own dog just freeze and stare intensely into a completely empty corner of the room? According to the tablet, that isn't just a quirky habit. That is the biological detection hardware activating. When impartial researchers cross-referenced ancient Sumerian records of these mass dog trigger events with modern seismic history, the numbers were shocking. A staggering 78% of documented trigger events occurred exactly within 14 days of a major catastrophic earthquake. The dogs weren't reacting to the shaking itself. They were sensing whatever was moving deep beneath the earth, causing the disturbance in the first place. And Code 7 reveals that this presence didn't just agitate the dogs. It emitted an invisible energy frequency that severely impacted human minds. When the dogs triggered, human populations would simultaneously suffer from inexplicable mass panic, sudden fevers, violence, and what the texts call clouded thoughts, which was essentially a complete inability to think rationally. Interestingly, though, not all humans were affected equally. Code 8 introduces a specific group called the Dugu, translated as the different ones. The Sumerians carefully documented that certain humans possessed genetic variations that provided natural resistance to this invisible threat. Traits like having red hair, being left-handed, or possessing an unusual height acted as a biological failsafe when the rest of the population fell victim to the anxiety.
All right, let's look at the terrifying schedule behind all of this in Part 4, the 3,600 years cycle. The texts are explicit here. The visitor operates on a precise 3,600-year degradation cycle. The astronomical calculations in Code 6 map out the return windows to roughly 8,800 BCE, 5,200 BCE, 1,600 BCE, and the most recent one around 1,200 CE. What's crazy is how these exact dates align flawlessly with sudden ice ages, massive climate shifts, and total civilizational collapses throughout our historical record.
Code 9 goes even further, documenting the precise orbital mechanics of a massive object entering Earth's atmosphere. They recorded its trajectory, its velocity, its mass, and the resulting energy release. Modern astrophysicists who analyzed these ancient numbers confirmed their unsettling accuracy. This data outlines exactly what would happen to Earth's climate if a celestial object of this sheer size actually arrived. So, if we look at that last 3,600-year window that closed around 1200 CE, historically, this aligns flawlessly with a period of massive global disruption. We see the sudden decline of the medieval warm period, extreme global crop failures, and the devastating arrival of the Black Death. And right alongside all of that, monks and scholars were documenting mass, inexplicable agitation in animal behavior worldwide.
Which brings us right to the modern era. We aren't just looking at ancient history here, we're looking at an active grid. Today, animal behavior scientists are tracking an exponential uptick in unusual dog sensitivity events. We're talking reports from 17 different countries showing mass behavioral anomalies. And when these major trigger events happen today, they have a 91% correlation with significant seismic activity following shortly after. The system, it seems, is still firing.
The core takeaway from all this source material is that we might have fundamentally forgotten our own history. We've just assumed these animals were cute companions. But the tablet insists that dogs are not pets. They are sentries. They are a self-replicating biological alarm system, acting as our last line of defense against a cyclical threat we simply forgot how to fear. But our guardians, they never stopped watching.
So, I leave you with this final thought. As this 3,600-year cycle continues to tick away, potentially bringing whatever this object is closer with every pass, the next time you're sitting in your living room and your dog suddenly stops, stands up, and stares intently into an empty hallway, growling at something you cannot see, you have to ask yourself, are they just being quirky, or is the alarm system functioning exactly as it was designed? Are they still watching for the return?